Sup, how is everyone doing? Today we're gonna design a knight character. This knight will have shining armor, will be tall, and will have a wide stature. Designing a character is all about their story, putting what they are and what they represent in physical form so you can tell as much as you need and have the audience get them as fast as possible. I decided to start with a knight because other features like faces, expressions are all very hard to do. So using the armor brings other set of challenge because no face, but also simplifies other aspects. Little abridged plot that totally will probably change it later, but I think it's a strong foundation to start. Now I call this character a knight mostly because of the visuals. In practice, this is just a young man who has gotten scraps of metal from people who tried to invade his hometown, who attacked his little village, and he's the son of a blacksmith. And with the knowledge of his father, he created his own armor and made himself a champion of the people. So he's not a knight in the sense of a title, rather is mostly the aesthetic and the respect he gets from people. And when I say respect, I'm talking about his village because most people make fun of him. His armor is also very special and unique because it's not standard at all. And his mother is a sorceress, so she helped him with his spells, magic on his armor. So his armor is extremely unique and sometimes even unpredictable. So he's a very simple character, and I wanted to translate that simplicity in his design. Like nothing overly fancy, nothing overly dramatic, is spiky. Now those were the keys for the design. He has this helmet which I really like that has like a metal hatch on top. I think it looks really funny and it's not among the fanciest helmets. If you see the fanciest helmets, they aren't like this. This is an older historical design of helmet, which because he's very simple, it comes from a simple village. Basing his armor in older design, it sounded a bit more logical because he probably could not study the fanciest methods of armor, and even if he could, his materials would not be suitable for making such advanced armor. Now, let's be honest, my drawing skills are nothing to write home about, but they are serviceable because they put the idea. The idea is the most important, and translating that to 3D usually needs something to look at so you can make your character. I wanted to do this to show you don't need to be an amazing artist to make a design. You can make a design even if you don't know how to draw correctly or draw very well, or maybe you can draw, which would make things a lot of easier. But to show you that your ideas matter and you can easily translate them into other mediums you are comfortable with and using the ones you're not very good at to empower you in those other mediums. I came up with that elephant head design for the armor because I saw a lot of historical armor that had fancy stuff. Maybe the elephant's too dramatic, but there were a lot of nose guards that could be interpreted as a trunk for an elephant, could be used like that with design on top of it. So I thought it was interesting enough that I could do that without compromising the practicality of the helmet. Now, maybe the tusks are a bit too much, they would be a weak point, people could grab them, but it's one of those situations where I think the fantasy of the tusks and the elephant helmet outweigh the practicality in interesting factor. So I left them up. Yet it's still, if you compare the rest of their helmet, I think it's still practical enough even with them. People in history never use the most practical things. Sometimes people decided to be fancy and not be 100% practical. Alright, a lot of historical armor would have been more practical, but people decided to be fancy. So I thought that compromise worked. And because my character is living his power fantasy of being the champion of people, he actually helped people, it's not just a fantasy. He actually fought a little bit of enemies, a little bit of monsters. So he's actually kind of an adventurer. He never left the village, but around his village is a lot of problems. And he fought. I think this visual of the elephant, because the elephant, especially the African elephant, is a very strong animal, very respected animal. African warriors, they're rode elephants, like Indians really ride elephants. There's That's in their culture. So having this strong animal in his helmet, I thought it was worth it. The fantasy aspect outweighed the practicality, and like I explained it, I don't think it's that much damaging. I think the design being more interesting because this fact, was a plus in the end. I'm really glad I did that. Now we have the situation with the 3D model. I have a base here. It's a low poly base, so I can make all the models I want consistently. Because if you don't make your human characters consistently, it's pretty hard for you to make a believable world. When it comes to nature, animals, you can have a few things out of place and they still work organically, but you need a strong art style. And when you break their art style to create very different, strange things, maybe using a super realistic texture when you didn't use, horror games just do stuff like that, like using real life photos, even though the game doesn't use real life footage for anything else, to the horror aspect. So you need to always be mindful so you can work with your art style. Now this character's body is very wide. The frame, the shoulders, the arms, legs, everything is wide because he has a lot of muscle, but he has fat too. Imagine Mr. Incredible when he's in his older years, because his whole frame is very wide. His stomach is wide, his arms are still strong, but they have fat in them. So this is what I'm going for. This is not an older character, by the way. This is a very young man, but he has fat and muscle, both working in unison to create this wide frame. This character won't be very ripped. You actually won't see this character. I'm working on the armor right now. With such low poly models, you don't create a character and dress them over. You actually mess with the base and you create the armor over the base. It's not a second skin. You are actually using the body and morphing it. When you have very realistic character, because of clothes, you want them to overlap the character's body. When it's low poly, you don't do that. You just mess with it. As you can see, I'm working in the anatomy because I still want the anatomy inside to be believable. This is why I'm starting making this character wide like this, work on the pectoral muscles, to later on when I make the armor, the character doesn't diverge. Because you can make the mistake of the armor not being wide enough for the character, so you make a frame that would look weird because the character will look bigger without the armor rather than being bigger with the armor. Now, some armors, they give a very small waist because of the design of the armor, the elements, and the aesthetics of the time. So you also have to keep that in mind, that the armor may give your character a small waist. So you need to be very careful, because if you mistake that, you would have a very weird looking character out of the armor, because the armor will look like it doesn't fit the character, which would be a disaster. Now, one thing very hard with the armor is how it connects. If you look real life armor, you have lots of layers. You have padded layer, you usually have chainmail to cover some gaps. Later you have other types of armor that they use a scale type of armor to cover the gap, so you no longer need chainmail. But you still use many layers, and the connections are very hard to translate in such a low poly style. It's pretty hard for you to make those finer details, and one of the biggest challenges of the low poly style is choosing when you do art for it or when you do 3D modeling. Like, do I physically put a cube in that place, or do I just paint later? And there are pros and cons for both of those things. Now, I put this part in slow motion because I'm really embarrassed that I forgot how to do this. You see, the model is inside out. That's why the shadows are buggy. When you have a game, if you look inside the characters, you use the camera with the wall and you can look inside the characters, you will see they are hollow. There is nothing inside. This is because you don't want to render the inside part, because you're only gonna see the outside part. If you could see the inside part, you'll be wasting twice the processing power, and the character would essentially look exactly the same. Now I have skipped some of the process. Maybe later I can post the whole time lapse. Now, painting in 3D, that's very interesting. You know what every artist tells you not to do? It's to paint in pillow shading. Basically, it's a light you don't know where it's coming from, so it looks like a pillow. That's exactly what you want to do in 3D. Because you have light, that the engine hinders. So you don't want to create very specific shadows. You want to create shadows in places where there will always be shadows, like under the armpit, in the gaps of the armor. Those places are always dark, and that would constitute the pylon shading you don't want to do in 2D. Why I painting? You can see I'm trying some cell shading. It's those harsh lines, Borderlands and Wind Waker used cell shading. This is what I'm trying with this character, why I paint the texture on top. I'm using very low resolution, so it will be a pixel art texture under the characters. You can see the pixels. I am a big fan of the style. I don't know if any of you are. I also tried doing it with smooth shading, a shading of very high quality also. Basically double this resolution where you cannot see the pixels anymore. And you also use a linear shading. This is constant. Changing it to linear makes the pixels blurry, so it's a blurry texture. I tried doing that later, and I'm going to show in the end of the video an alternative design of this character. Now, one strange thing about the design are those sleeves. They are fabric, when if you look any armor of the time, he would clearly wear plate armor. I gave those sleeves because I wanted differentiation in the design. I wanted a striking element, so it would not look so bland. Alright, I was afraid the character would look bland. There was a lot of use of fabric over armor, so those sleeves are technically over armor. He's wearing plate arm defense. Now, this is the final design, at least the first one. This is the second one. It has purple arms. I thought they would look huge. And then I made an alpha channel with chainmail, so I could cover the arms with chainmail. I know it technically goes against what I said about the fabric being over the character's arm with plate underneath. Why would you use chainmail over? But I was just testing it, seeing how it looks. I think I'm gonna go back to just having the sleeves being fabric, but also having the chainmail layer under his waist, like under that skirt metal thing. I think then the design will truly shine. I would like to know your opinion. I did the shading. You can see on the right the character looks much more shining. I thought that was important for his champion status, champion of the people, that his armor would be shinier. But I would love everyone's opinion, if you could give it to me, about how I could change the armor to give it more of a makeshift feel. I was thinking doing some asymmetry, changing one pauldron to the other, maybe changing something of the leg, because the armor needs to be makeshift because of this character's story. And I think the armor looks much more standardized. While I like the helmet, the rest of the armor is not as unique. So yeah, that was my first little commentary video on making a character. I would love suggestions. I could make some tutorials, would like to learn animation, alpha shading, something. I'm really lost in this YouTube thing. I just wanted to show my character, like I created it, I wanted to show someone, see some opinions, what I could improve. And if you made it to the end, thank you. Like, thank you really for sticking out. I would love video ideas, animation ideas. Like, I've been studying this 3D thing for so long, and I just wanted to use it. I just want to make something fun and interesting. And like I said, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm ending right here. Like, bye.